Life, at its best, feels like a perfectly orchestrated illusion. You wake up every morning trusting the people closest to you, believing in the stability of your relationships, and never imagining that those very people might one day shatter your world. That was my reality, or what I thought it was. For years, I lived in what felt like a bubble of comfort and joy. I was in a relationship with Gail, the person I believed was my soulmate. We had an undeniable connection, one built on trust, love, and shared dreams. At least, that's what I thought. And then there was Sia, my best friend since high school. She was the sister I never had, my confidant, the person I could call at any hour of the day or night. Together, the three of us formed what I used to call my dream team. We were inseparable. Sia was the kind of friend who could light up a room with her energy. She had this magnetic personality, always making people laugh and feel included. Gail, on the other hand, was quieter but no less charming. His warmth balanced Sia's spark, and together they made life feel a little brighter. I used to joke that they liked each other more than they liked me, because they clicked so effortlessly. But it was all harmless fun, or so I convinced myself. When I look back, I can see the subtle signs that I ignored. They were small things, seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of our friendship and my relationship with Gail. I remember the way Gail's eyes would light up whenever Sia walked into the room. It wasn't something glaring or obvious, but it was there, like a faint hum in the background that I chose to tune out. Then there were the times they'd shared jokes that I wasn't part of. Inside jokes, they'd call them. Ones I brushed off as harmless fun between two people who had spent a lot of time together because of me. There were also the little moments when Sia would casually mention how lucky I was to have Gail. She'd say things like, "You really hit the jackpot with him," or, "If you ever let him go, I'm next in line." I'd laugh it off, thinking it was just her playful personality. It never crossed my mind that there might be a deeper meaning behind her words. Why would it? Sia had been there for me through thick and thin. She knew my struggles, my fears, my dreams. She was the person who cheered me on when I doubted myself. The idea that she could ever hurt me wasn't just unlikely, it was unimaginable. And then there was Gail. He wasn't the kind of person who wore his emotions on his sleeve, but he had a way of making me feel loved in quiet, understated ways. A kiss on the forehead as I worked late at night, a text in the middle of the day to say he was thinking of me, or the way he'd hold my hand when we watched movies together. It all made me feel secure. He wasn't perfect, but who is? I loved him for who he was, flaws and all. Together, the three of us spent so much time together that people often assumed we were a trio of best friends. We'd go on trips, have movie nights, and celebrate every milestone together. Sia was there when Gail and I moved into our first apartment. She helped us paint the walls and decorate the space, turning it into a home. She was there for every birthday, every anniversary celebration. She was part of our lives in a way that felt natural, seamless. I never thought twice about inviting her over or sharing details of my relationship with her. She was my best friend, after all. If I had an argument with Gail, she was the first person I'd call. If I was planning a surprise for him, she'd help me pull it off. I trusted her completely, and that trust became the foundation of our friendship. I believed that the bond we shared was unbreakable, but trust can be a dangerous thing. It lulls you into a false sense of security, blinds you to the cracks that might be forming right under your nose. In hindsight, there were moments that should have made me pause, moments that should have set off alarms in my head. Like the time Sia posted a picture on social media of the three of us at a party. The caption read, "My favorite couple and my favorite person." Then no. Sometimes you have no idea how much you have until it's gone. Lucky me. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I see it in a completely different light. Or the time Gael defended Sia in an argument we had. It wasn't a big deal, just a silly disagreement about something trivial, but the way he jumped to her side so quickly caught me off guard. I remember laughing and saying, "Whose side are you on anyway?" He just shrugged and said, "I'm just being fair." It seemed innocent enough back then, but now it feels like another puzzle piece I missed. The truth is, when you love and trust people, you don't question their intentions. You don't scrutinize every interaction, every word, every look. You give them the benefit of the doubt because you believe they'd never hurt you. That's what I did. I believed in Gail and Sia because I couldn't imagine my life without them. They were my constants, the people I counted on when everything else felt uncertain. Even as I write this, it's hard to reconcile the memories of those happy times with the reality of what came next. It feels like looking at a photograph of a stranger's life, not my own. I see the smiles, the laughter, the closeness we shared, and it all feels like a cruel joke now. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs that were right in front of me? But that's the thing about betrayal. It thrives in the shadows, hidden behind the facade of trust and love. It's not loud or obvious. It's subtle, creeping into your life like a thief in the night, stealing everything you thought you knew about the people you love. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. Looking back, I can see the cracks that were there all along, the ones I ignored because I didn't want to see them. But at the time, I was blissfully unaware. I was living in a bubble, one that felt warm and safe and full of love. I didn't know that bubble was about to burst. It started as an ordinary evening, one of those nights where everything feels so mundane that you never anticipate your entire world is about to implode. I was at home, scrolling through my emails and organizing my calendar for the week. Gail was sitting on the couch, casually watching something on TV, his phone lying on the coffee table. It buzzed once, lighting up briefly, but he didn't seem to notice. Without giving it much thought, I reached over to grab it. I wasn't suspicious or looking for anything in particular. I was only planning to check the weather. My hand felt slippery and rotten. The screen lit up as I unlocked it. For a second, my eyes drifted to the notification banner that had popped up. It was a message from Sia. At first, I smiled. It was normal for her to message Gail, after all. We were all friends, and they often coordinated things like birthday surprises or group plans. But this message didn't look like their usual casual exchanges. It wasn't a meme, a question about plans, or a funny anecdote. It was short and vague, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Hashtag. The world seemed to pause in that moment, as though everything around me had gone eerily silent. My heartbeat quickened, a dull thud in my chest that grew louder with each passing second. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe I had misunderstood. But deep down, I knew the truth was staring me in the face. My stomach churned as I clicked on the message, opening the conversation thread. What I found next made my blood run cold. The messages between them were detailed, intimate, and unmistakably wrong. They spoke of stolen moments, secret meetings, and feelings they'd been hiding from me. It was all there, laid out in front of me in black and white. My hands trembled as I scrolled through weeks of messages. I read every word, even though each one felt like a knife to my chest. They reminisced about the times they'd spent together, times I hadn't known about, times they'd kept hidden from me. There were mentions of dinners, late-night meetups, and even a weekend when Gail had told me he was out of town for work. It was all a lie. Everything was a lie. My mind raced as I tried to piece it all together, but the more I read, the less sense it made. How could they do this to me? How could two people I trusted more than anyone betray me so completely? As I scrolled further, I stumbled upon a message that nearly made me drop the phone. Sia had sent a photo of herself, one that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Gail's response was even worse. He had replied with words that I had once believed were reserved for me, words of affection and desire that now felt cheap and hollow. My hands shook so badly that I had to set the phone down for a moment. I stared at it as though it were a ticking time bomb, something dangerous that I needed to get rid of. But no matter how much I wanted to look away, I couldn't. I picked it back up, scrolling further, desperate to understand how this had happened. How long had it been going on? When had it started? And most importantly, why? But the messages revealed that their affair had begun months ago, shortly after a party we had all attended together. I remembered that night vividly. We'd laughed, danced, and celebrated as a group, completely unaware that it would mark the beginning of the end for us. They had stayed behind to clean up after the party, while I went home early, exhausted from the night. That had been their first opportunity, and they had taken it without hesitation. Every memory I had of the past few months began to warp and twist in my mind. Moments that once felt innocent and happy now seemed tainted and sinister. I thought about the times when Sia had canceled plans with me at the last minute, claiming she was too busy. I thought about the times when Gale had been distant, distracted, or unusually protective of his phone. It all made sense now. They had been building their own little world behind my back, one filled with lies and betrayal. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the realization sank in. It wasn't just the betrayal itself that hurt. It was the depth of their deception, the calculated way they had gone about it. They hadn't just stumbled into this. They had made a choice, over and over again, to lie to me, to hurt me, to destroy everything we had built together. My chest felt heavy, as though an invisible weight was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I couldn't understand how two people I loved and trusted could do this to me. I thought about Sia, my best friend, the person I had shared everything with, my fears, my dreams, my insecurities. She knew how much I loved Gale, how much he meant to me. And yet, she had done this. And then there was Gael, the man I had planned to spend my life with. He had looked me in the eyes every day, told me he loved me and made me believe in a future that was never real. He had held my hand, kissed me, and promised me forever, all while hiding this devastating secret. As the shock began to wear off, it was replaced by a searing anger. I wanted to confront them both, to demand answers, to make them feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused me. But at the same time, I felt paralyzed, unsure of what to do next. The foundation of my life had been ripped out from under me, and I didn't know how to move forward. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the messages, letting the reality of the situation sink in. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't bother to wipe them away. The pain was overwhelming, all-consuming, like a storm that I couldn't escape. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly broken. Eventually, I put the phone down and looked over at Gale. He was still sitting on the couch, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the man who had done this to me. He looked so calm, so normal, as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. My entire world had been turned upside down, and there was no going back. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I couldn't pretend everything was okay, couldn't sweep this under the rug. But I also knew that once I confronted him, once I said the words out loud, there would be no turning back. This wasn't just a bad dream I could wake up from. This was my reality now. The confrontation felt inevitable, like a storm cloud slowly creeping closer, heavy and full of chaos waiting to be unleashed. I couldn't carry the weight of what I'd discovered alone. Every moment I spent in the same room as Gale felt unbearable. The space between us, once filled with love and comfort, now seemed suffocating, filled with tension I couldn't release. But more than anything, I felt a growing sense of determination. I needed to face this head-on, to look him in the eye and demand answers. I deserved that much, even if it wouldn't undo the damage. That evening, I waited until Gael went to the kitchen to refill his drink. I grabbed his phone and placed it on the table in front of me. When he returned, I could see the shift in his expression as his eyes landed on it. It wasn't fear or guilt at first, just confusion, mild curiosity. He had no idea what was coming. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think, but I forced myself to speak. "What is this, Gail?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. His eyes darted to the phone, and in that split second I saw something flash across his face. Recognition. Panic. He reached for the phone, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Don't," I said firmly. I already saw everything. His silence was deafening, and it only confirmed what I already knew. He didn't deny it, didn't try to explain or deflect. He just stood there, frozen, as though he were trying to figure out how to respond. I could feel my chest tightening, the weight of his betrayal pressing down on me like a boulder. I wanted him to say something, anything, but the longer he stayed silent, the angrier I became. "How long?" I finally asked, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay composed. "How long have you been sneaking around with her behind my back?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he looked away, unable to meet my gaze. That small act of cowardice sent a surge of rage through me. "Answer me, Gail," I demanded, my voice rising. "I deserve to know the truth." Finally, he sighed and sank into the chair across from me, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "A few months," he admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to, but—" I cut him off before he could finish. "You didn't mean for it to," I repeated, my tone dripping with disbelief. "Don't insult me, Gael. Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice. Both of you did." He flinched at my words, and for a brief moment, I saw something resembling shame in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. No amount of remorse could erase what he had done. I wanted to scream at him, to throw every cruel word I could think of in his face, but I held back. Instead, I asked the question that had been haunting me since the moment I read those messages. Why her? My voice was quieter now, laced with pain instead of anger. Why my best friend? Wasn't it enough to betray me? Did you have to do it with the one person I trusted the most? He hesitated, struggling to find the right words, or maybe just trying to come up with an excuse. "It wasn't about her," he finally said, his voice strained. I don't know. I felt disconnected from us, and she was just there. It wasn't planned, I swear. It just happened." His words felt like a slap in the face. Disconnected. How could he have felt disconnected when I had poured so much of myself into our relationship? I had loved him with everything I had, trusted him implicitly, and this was how he repaid me? By seeking comfort in the arms of my best friend? I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, I stood up and walked away, needing space to breathe, to process everything. I locked myself in the bedroom, leaving him alone in the living room. Once inside, I sank onto the bed, burying my face in my hands as the tears finally came. My mind was racing, flooded with memories of every moment I had shared with Gail and Sia. All the laughter, the inside jokes, the shared experiences. It all felt tainted now, corrupted by their betrayal. I thought about the times Sia had comforted me after a fight with Gail, how she had always assured me that he loved me and that we'd work things out. How could she say those things to me while she was secretly betraying me? And Gail? How could he lie to my face every day, pretending everything was fine while he was sneaking around with her? The depth of their deception was staggering, and the pain of it was almost too much to bear. I stayed in that room for what felt like hours, my thoughts spiraling as I tried to make sense of everything. Eventually, I heard a soft knock on the door. "Can we talk?" Gail's voice was hesitant, almost pleading. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to face him again, to hear more excuses or half-hearted apologies. After a while, I heard him walk away and I let out a shaky breath. I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. We lived together after all. But I also knew that things would never be the same between us. The trust I had once felt, the love that had bound us together, it was all gone, shattered into a million pieces that could never be put back together. The next day, I confronted Sia. I called her, my hands shaking as I held the phone to my ear. When she answered, her voice was cheerful, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. "Hey, what's up?" she said casually, as if nothing had happened. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know," I said bluntly. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I know about you and Gail," I continued, my voice trembling. "I saw the messages." There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," she said, her tone filled with forced sympathy. Her words only fueled my anger. "You didn't mean for me to find out," I repeated bitterly. "Is that what you're sorry about? That I found out? Or are you actually sorry for what you did?" She tried to explain herself, to justify her actions, but I couldn't listen. Every word out of her mouth felt like another betrayal, another reminder of how deeply she had hurt me. "You were supposed to be my best friend," I said, my voice breaking. "How could you do this to me?" Her response was full of excuses, just like Gail's. She claimed it was a mistake, that she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she had never wanted to hurt me. But her words rang hollow, empty. Nothing she said could undo the damage she had done. I ended the call, feeling more lost and broken than ever. The two people I had trusted the most had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The days following the confrontation were a blur of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief, and even moments of numbness where it felt like my mind was protecting me by shutting down. I oscillated between moments of calm and complete emotional upheaval. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head, dissecting every interaction I'd had with Gail and Sia over the past months, searching for signs I'd missed. I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt humiliated for trusting them so blindly. The worst part was the constant ache in my chest, as though my heartbreak had taken on a physical form, refusing to let me rest. At one end of the spectrum, I allowed myself to want things from my heart. Gail, in his own way, tried to fix things, though his attempts only deepened the wound. He said all the things I expected him to say, that he was sorry, that he had made a mistake, that he didn't want to lose me. But his words felt hollow, like he was only saying them because he was caught, not because he truly understood the gravity of what he had done. I watched him move around the house, trying to act normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every time I saw him, I was reminded of what he had done, and the pain of it all felt as raw as the moment I first found out. Sia, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found. She hadn't reached out since our phone call, and part of me was grateful for that. I didn't want to hear more excuses or apologies from her. But her absence also left a strange void. For years, she had been the person I turned to when life got hard, the one who helped me make sense of things. Now, in the most difficult moment of my life, she was the reason I was in pain. The person I would have leaned on the most had become the source of my suffering, and I had no idea how to navigate that. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair itself. It was about the loss of trust, the destruction of relationships I had believed were unbreakable. It was about the way they had made me question everything: my judgment, my self-worth, my ability to see people for who they truly were. I had always prided myself on being a good judge of character, but now I wasn't so sure. If I hadn't seen the messages with my own eyes, I might have continued to believe in their lies indefinitely. That thought haunted me, making me doubt not only them but also myself. I spent a lot of time alone in those first few days, avoiding Gale as much as possible. I couldn't bear to look at him, let alone talk to him. Every interaction felt forced and painful, like trying to ignore a gaping wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I started sleeping in the guest room, needing the physical distance to match the emotional chasm that had formed between us. It was a small act, but it felt like a declaration of the divide that now existed in our relationship. In the quiet moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, I found myself reflecting on the nature of betrayal and what it meant to truly forgive someone. Could I ever forgive Gale for what he had done? Could I ever forgive Sia? The idea of forgiveness felt impossible, like trying to rebuild a bridge that had been burned to ashes. But at the same time, I knew that holding on to the anger and pain would only eat away at me. I didn't want to be consumed by bitterness, but I also didn't know how to let go. I tried to distract myself by focusing on practical matters. I went to work, kept up with my responsibilities, and made an effort to appear as though I was okay. But beneath the surface, I was anything but okay. Every task felt like an uphill battle. Every smile felt forced. I was going through the motions, but my heart wasn't in it. The betrayal had left a mark on me, one that I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. Eventually, I decided that I needed clarity. I needed to understand why this had happened, not just to assign blame, but to make sense of it all. I sat down with Gale one evening, forcing myself to face him despite the pain it caused me. I asked him the questions that had been haunting me. Why he had done it, what he had felt, whether he had ever truly loved me. His answers were messy and unsatisfying, filled with contradictions and half-truths. He claimed that he had loved me, that he still did, but that he had felt disconnected and unsure of himself. He said that he hadn't intended to hurt me, that he had made a mistake and regretted it deeply. But his words did little to ease my pain. They felt like excuses, not explanations, and they didn't address the deeper issue of trust that had been shattered between us. After that conversation, I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. The weight of the betrayal was too much to bear, and I needed to start taking steps toward healing, even if I didn't know what that would look like yet. I started by setting boundaries with Gael, making it clear that while we were still living under the same roof, our relationship was over. I told him that I needed space to process everything, and he agreed, though I could see the pain in his eyes. As for Sia, I decided that I needed to let her go completely. Our friendship had been irreparably damaged, and I couldn't see a path forward for us. It was a painful decision, but it was also a necessary one. Keeping her in my life would only serve as a constant reminder of the betrayal, and I knew that I needed to focus on my own healing. In the days that followed, I began to take small steps toward rebuilding my life. I leaned on other friends, the ones who had always been there for me, and opened up to them about what had happened. Their support was a lifeline, reminding me that not everyone in my life was capable of such betrayal. I also started therapy, knowing that I needed professional help to navigate the complex emotions I was feeling. Through it all, I began to realize that healing wasn't a linear process. Some days I felt strong and capable, ready to move forward and leave the pain behind. Other days, the weight of it all would hit me like a tidal wave, pulling me under and leaving me gasping for air. But no matter how hard it was, I knew that I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let Gail and Sia's choices dictate the course of my life. Slowly but surely, I started to find moments of peace. They were small and fleeting at first. A walk in the park, a conversation with a friend, a quiet evening spent reading. But those moments gave me hope, a glimpse of what life could be like if I allowed myself to let go of the pain and embrace the possibility of healing. The betrayal would always be a part of my story, a scar that would never fully fade. but I was determined not to let it define me. I was more than what had happened to me, more than the pain I had endured. And as I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece, I realized that I had the strength to move forward, even if the road ahead was uncertain. Moving forward after the betrayal was neither simple nor straightforward. The end of my relationship with Gail and the abrupt termination of my friendship with Sia had left an emptiness in my life that I couldn't ignore. It was as though a part of my identity had been ripped away, leaving behind a raw, aching void. For years, I had built my life around these two people, trusting them implicitly, loving them unconditionally. Now I was left to reckon with the reality of who they truly were and what that meant for me. In the weeks that followed, I tried to focus on creating a sense of normalcy. I woke up each morning with a deliberate intention to move forward, even when it felt impossible. I returned to my routines, pushing myself to get out of bed, go to work, and stay occupied. The structure helped, giving me something to hold on to when the weight of everything threatened to crush me. But even with distractions, the pain lingered just beneath the surface, waiting for quiet moments to resurface. One of the most challenging aspects was learning to trust myself again. The betrayal had shaken me to my core, making me doubt my ability to see people for who they really were. I replayed every interaction with Gail and Sia in my mind, searching for red flags I might have missed, moments where their deception had slipped through. It was exhausting, this endless analysis of the past, but I couldn't seem to stop. It felt like my mind was trying to protect me by making sense of what had happened, even if it meant reliving the pain over and over. Therapy became a crucial part of my healing process. My therapist helped me unpack the layers of emotions I was feeling: anger, sadness, betrayal, guilt, and gave me the tools to start processing them in a healthier way. She reminded me that what had happened was not a reflection of my worth or my ability to trust, but rather a testament to the flaws in the people who had hurt me. That distinction was hard to accept at first, but over time it became a mantra I repeated to myself whenever self-doubt crept in. I also began to explore what it meant to truly take care of myself. For so long I had poured my energy into nurturing my relationships with Gail and Sia, often putting their needs above my own. Now I had the opportunity to focus solely on myself, to figure out who I was outside of those relationships. It wasn't easy. I had spent so much time defining myself in relation to them that being alone felt foreign, even frightening. But it was also liberating in a way I hadn't expected. I started small, carving out moments of joy where I could. I took long walks in the evenings, letting the fresh air clear my mind and soothe my spirit. I rediscovered hobbies I had neglected, like painting and writing, finding solace in the creative process. I spent time with friends who had stood by me, allowing their love and support to remind me that not everyone in my life was capable of such betrayal. These little acts of self-care became anchors, keeping me grounded as I navigated the storm of emotions. Letting go of my anger toward Gail and Sia was perhaps the hardest part. It wasn't something that happened all at once, but rather a gradual process, like chipping away at a massive stone. At first, the anger felt necessary, a way of holding on to the power I felt they had taken from me. But as time went on, I realized that holding on to that anger was only hurting me. It kept me tethered to the pain, preventing me from moving forward. Forgiveness, I learned, didn't mean condoning what they had done or inviting them back into my life. It meant releasing the grip they had on my heart, allowing myself to heal without being weighed down by resentment. It was an act of self-preservation, not an act of reconciliation. Forgiving them didn't mean forgetting the betrayal. It meant choosing to prioritize my peace over my pain. As the months passed, I began to feel a sense of clarity. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed me the way it once had. I started to see the betrayal as a chapter in my life, not the entirety of my story. It was a painful chapter, one that had taught me hard lessons about trust, boundaries, and resilience. But it was also a chapter that had shown me my strength, my capacity to endure and rebuild. Eventually, I moved out of the home I had shared with Gail. Staying there had become unbearable, each room filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. Moving was bittersweet. While it was hard to let go of the familiar, it also felt like a fresh start, a chance to create a space that was entirely my own. I decorated the new place with care, filling it with things that brought me joy and comfort. It became a sanctuary, a reminder that I was capable of building something beautiful out of the wreckage. Through it all, I learned to trust myself again. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when doubts still crept in, whispering that I might never fully recover. But I pushed back against those thoughts, reminding myself of how far I had come. I reminded myself that I had survived the betrayal, that I had faced the pain head-on and come out stronger. One day, I found myself looking back on the experience with a sense of gratitude, not for what had happened, but for what it had taught me. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also forced me to confront truths about myself and my relationships that I might have otherwise ignored. It had shown me the importance of setting boundaries, of valuing myself, of choosing to surround myself with people who truly cared for me. By the time I reached the 1-year mark, the pain had become a distant echo, a memory that no longer had the power to hurt me. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, creating a new version of myself that was stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I had learned to love myself in a way I never had before, to find joy and fulfillment in my own company. The betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. It had tested my strength, but it had also revealed it. And as I looked forward to the future, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that better days were ahead. I knew that I would carry the scars of what had happened, but I also knew that they were a testament to my survival, a reminder that I had endured and thrived. In the end, the betrayal had become a part of my story. But it wasn't the end of it. It was a turning point, a moment of reckoning that had set me on a new path. And as I walked that path, I carried with me the lessons I had learned, the strength I had discovered, and the unshakable belief that I was capable of creating a life filled with love, joy, and authenticity.